Welcome in, everyone. First solo episode for me here. I'm Tim. I'm coming from the Other Room podcast, and I'll be starting some more content over here on my own personal channel. I'm going to be called Tim Talks as a brand. And so it's an opportunity for me and a space for me to talk about some things that I'm really passionate about. Sports, media, a lot of those things are going to be the emphasis. It's going to be all about sports today. We're going to be talking about the changes made to the NBA draft. Congratulations to the New York Knicks for winning the championship days ago and celebrating. I'm so happy they didn't burn New York City to the ground with that celebration. It looked unbelievable. And Jalen Brunson, what a run for a player, especially of his stature, to be able to deliver a championship to the city of New York. Now, this NBA draft change won't be implemented in this draft. However, I want to talk about it. This is something I'm very interested in because I think it is such a bad idea. And to show you why, let's go through where we're coming from previous draft and how it's going to work this year, and then how this is going to play into the coming draft. So this year, how did the draft lottery get selected? How do teams get the picks that they get? Well, the bottom three teams all have a 14% chance of getting the number one overall pick. Then it's 12.5%, 10.5%, 9%, so on, all the way to the 14th pick, which has a 0.5% chance. And those are odds of getting the first overall selection. So we've had teams recently with a 1% chance, like the Dallas Mavericks, get the number one overall pick and select Cooper Flag. However, this year, the Washington Wizards, who are one of the highest selection teams that had the worst record in the NBA, were able to get the number one overall pick with that 14% odds system. It's actually the first year the lowest record team has been rewarded with the number one pick under the current system. However, all of that is going to change. As we go into this next phase of the draft, the change that they've made, what we're going to see is the bottom three teams go from a 14% to a 5.4% chance. They are gutting the bottom of the lottery. And I think this is so terrible. I think this truly disrespects and dishonors teams that are just genuinely terrible. And this makes it so if you're just a bad team, like in my opinion, the Wizards this year, the Nets this year are just bad basketball teams. They're not playing for a lot because they don't have much to play for, because they don't have the requisite talent to be able to compete with some of the highest end teams in the NBA. Those teams should be rewarded. And we've seen in the past how just one singular player can change your franchise instantly, like Anthony Edwards in recent memory or Victor Wembanyama. These players can change everything for you, and it doesn't have to be immediate. The Spurs weren't instantly in the championship with Victor Wembanyama, but I mean, pretty quickly, they've been able to climb all the way to the NBA Finals, and the Minnesota Timberwolves have made multiple conference final appearances and semifinal appearances with Anthony Edwards leading their team. Now, the next odds, 5.4% for the top three, goes to 8.1% for teams 4 through 10 in the records selection here. So if you finish as the 4th through the 10th worst team record-wise in the NBA, you have a 3% about higher chance of getting the number one overall pick. And all of those odds are flat. Every single one of those teams has the same odds than any of the top three seeds. This is encouraging tanking. This is exactly the opposite of what they want to do. You just can't be the worst, but you just have to be in the middle of the worst. So halfway through the season, why not just shut it down? We've got a 15-game win lead on the Wizards, for example. Well, we can just shut a bunch of people down. We don't think that we're going to lose 15 more games. We can kind of control that in a certain way, especially if there's only 20 games left in the season or something like that. It's terrible, and like I mentioned, it really punishes these teams that are truly, truly awful. And then for the cherry on top, and the worst part of this entire thing, they've expanded the lottery to 16 teams, and the expansion of the lottery is now the teams that were the 10 and 9 seeds in the play-in tournament get the next 4 highest odds, which are equivalent to the 1, 2, and 3 worst records in the NBA, also at 5.4%. This is insane, and the rich are going to get richer rather than rewarding these teams who are just genuinely terrible with better players to improve their franchise. Now, is tanking a problem in the NBA? 100%. And what you could do is just leverage heavy, heavy fines to teams that are being convicted of tanking. And you might say, well, they've already been doing that. Just do it more or make the fines heavier. They fined the Utah Jazz multiple times, like $1 million or $500,000 for tanking. Make it $20 million. Make it $50 million to tank and say, this is not something we're putting up with, and set the precedent. I believe if you do that one time, owners aren't going to want to lose $50 million from their revenue shares to be able to pay off those fines, right? But if you just pay them $500,000 or charge them rather $500,000 or $1 million, that's nothing to these billionaires. They'll recoup that value instantly. Lastly, we have the losers of the 7-8 play-in game, a team that also will not be making the playoffs, that will get a 2.7% chance at getting the number 1 overall pick. I just want to remind you, that is the 15th and 16th team in the lottery that has a higher chance to get the number 1 overall pick than the 11th seed did in the previous system by 0.7%, and just about equivalent odds to the 10th seed. So they're going to have decent odds. Think about teams that almost made it this year: the Miami Heat, the Golden State Warriors, teams that would have had a chance to get the number 1 overall selection by having records right around 500. This is too perilous, where a team like the Heat could get the number 1 overall pick in this year's draft and take A.J. DeBonsa, where a team like the Jazz or the Wizards are just terrible and could use A.J. DeBonsa, and maybe their franchise would get a lot better. It's something that is going to be too punishing long-term, and something that I don't think is going to be rewarding for fans, because what do you have to cheer for if you got one of the 3 worst records in the NBA, but all the teams 4 through 10 have substantially better odds to get the number 1 pick than you do? You're going to be thinking that the 9th worst team or the 10th worst team in the NBA is probably going to get the number 1 pick, rather than these teams that have no chance anymore of competing if they consecutively do not get good picks. Now, they did put some protections in there, and I think these are fine, but I still think the overall system is going to be scrapped and disliked by fans way sooner than anything else. This system, however, does have a timeline on it, and they'll re-vote at the end of the 2029 NBA draft. So we're going to get this for at least 3 drafts here. Now, some of these protections include that relegated teams, and relegated teams mean you're one of the 3 worst teams in the NBA. You're in the relegation zone. You cannot pick lower than 12. Fine, but it's still, the odds are so shifted to teams 4 through 10. It's going to be brutal for these teams to try to get a top 3 pick after finishing with such negative records. Also, you cannot pick the number 1 overall in consecutive drafts. I think this is kind of stupid. I actually think it was awesome when Cleveland got consecutive number 1 overall picks in the early 2010s and they squandered one of those picks, but still, they were given the opportunity to really change their franchise around because they were bad. And if you get 2 number 1 picks in a row and you hit, you're going to have such a high chance to instantly revitalize your team and get your fan base charged again. Can you imagine if you're the Spurs and you get Victor Wembanyama, and then suddenly you're picking and you receive Cooper Flagg? Your whole franchise has changed forever. You are able to dominate for a decade, and it seems like they probably already will with some of the incredible draft choices they've made. But if the Timberwolves got Anthony Edwards, and then they were able to get Stephon Castle as well, wow, I mean, they're going to be incredible, right? As they continue to progress, and they would finally have that point guard and their pick of the litter with those number 1 picks if you're bad enough. I think that is a bad a decision by the NBA and Adam Silver. Additionally, you can't receive a top 5 pick in 3 consecutive years. So you could pick 4, and then your cap that next year is 6. Also a little punishing on teams that are really, really bad. However, maybe that these protections will bump some teams up higher in the lottery. But then again, if you've picked 5th and 5th, then the next year you're kept out of the top 5 because you're still terrible. I think that's awful because maybe that number 1 pick would revitalize your entire franchise. I don't understand why they feel as if there aren't teams that just suck and they think everyone's tanking. And again, there are some teams that are tanking and it's ugly. Just find the teams instead. And that will prevent tanking during the season as long as you do it to an extreme. And that sets the precedent for not doing this continually. If you get hit with two $50 million fines, I think you're never going to tank again. And you're going to tell your coach to play your players. And if you sit as the 9th worst team in the NBA, well, guess what? You might just get the number 1 overall pick like the Mavericks did. You never know, right? Additionally, another change to the draft here, you cannot protect picks that are top 12 through top 15 in trades. Fine. No problem with this. I think it's totally fine. I'm absolutely okay with removing pick protections in general. I think it would add a lot of spice to the draft and trades in the season if people just had unprotected first-round picks in general only that you can trade and make everyone's draft picks instantly more valuable because you never know who's going to have what pick, right? But if we have a pick protection and it's like, well, you can't have, if it's 1 through 10, it's ours, or if it's 1 through 7, it's our pick, no matter what. Well, then you traded somebody for, an asset that does not exist. And I think that's a little silly. I wish they would just get rid of all pick protections in general to make it so that the risk of trades carries a little bit more weight and would add a little bit of drama to the end of the seasons as well, especially if a team that was bad and made a big move and traded multiple first-round picks for someone, they're all unprotected picks. You better be good because now you don't want to give, like the Thunder, for example, who everyone seems to want to do business with, all of these unprotected first-round picks that could relay into top 10 picks. Really, the last big change that they made was they gave the league a little bit more power, the ability to reduce teams' lottery odds, modify their draft position, and impose significant fines in relation to the draft. Love it. Give the league more power. I just wish Adam Silver wasn't so spineless. He is, in my opinion, the worst commissioner in sports. I do not think he knows what he's doing. And I think the tanking problem and the cheating problem, like the Clippers, for example, are things that he doesn't know how to handle. And his response is to do nothing, which upsets the majority of NBA fans. It sounds like the Clippers were circumventing the cap, and it doesn't just sound like it. It seems that like that's the case, and they were paying Kawhi Leonard millions of dollars outside of the cap restrictions so that he would be a Los Angeles Clipper. Where's the penalty for this? We are still, the season has ended, the playoffs are through, the Clippers have been eliminated for some time. We still have seen no fines, no penalties, no rescinding of trades, no draft pick limitations at all from the NBA front office. And I don't understand. Why does Adam Silver think he just doesn't have to do anything or address these problems as they come up? When it comes to tanking, like I mentioned, it's the biggest thing on everyone's mind. There's players and kids. There's kids who go to these NBA games wanting to see their favorite players play, and they're being held out for load management or injuries that just barely popped up on the injury report the night before, and they're unable to see these incredible basketball players play the game at the highest level because of tanking. And like I mentioned, the Utah Jazz, the Washington Wizards, the Memphis Grizzlies seem to be some of the biggest proponents of this tanking problem, as well as the New Orleans Pelicans. But we're not seeing much more than slap on the wrists, oh, don't do that again, rather than heavy fines like you would have seen under someone like David Stern. I think Adam Silver should be fired and removed if nothing is done, and I think there should be retroactive penalties put on these teams for cheating essentially the game of basketball and not allowing their players who are healthy to go out and try to make an impact on the basketball court. What's wrong with making the play-in? Maybe you get in and you make a run. The Miami Heat made the finals as a low seed a few years ago. Are we too soon to forget? As Nick Wright says, I'm old enough to remember as some of these teams with low seeds make incredible pushes to the top end of the NBA playoffs. Why is that disincentivized so much to not try to win basketball games? Now, I've got some ideas to fix this, and this is where I want to get into the biggest section of the episode, which is going to be, how do we fix the NBA draft? Now, I've got two suggestions that I think would make a huge difference on improving the NBA draft. And because I think their idea, which is going to take place here soon after this draft, is so extreme, my first one's going to be quite an extreme example as well. And then I've got a second example that I think would be more fair. Let's start with the crazy one. I think if you finish last in terms of record, you're the worst team in the NBA, a la the Washington Wizards, you should be relegated to the G League. I also think the G League champion, whoever wins that season, should be promoted to the NBA for that season. Now, that team is going to be at an inherent disadvantage with the G League talent that they have. And, a lot of the G League has former NBA players trying to revive their careers, or aspiring players that would revive their careers or make their career by being able to play a full season in the NBA that year. I also think you would instantly do an expansion-style draft. Every team would be able to protect 8 players, and that G League team would get to pick from the litter 3 players to add to their roster for the upcoming season. All of the G League contracts would just be converted to full-time NBA contracts, and that G League team would have all the powers and rights of an NBA team once they've been elevated to that status. The only thing that team would have to do, that G League team, is not finish last the next year. To help with that, they would also be guaranteed a top 5 pick in the upcoming NBA draft, with these odds, I think, similar to the old system, or that 14%. And because they weren't in the NBA last season, they would be replacing the odds of the lowest team and have a 14% chance to get that number 1 overall pick, with them not able to pick lower than 5, to give them a chance to make some real waves in the NBA that season with with superstar rookie, as well as talent that they've acquired from across the league. Can you imagine getting one of the Thunder's very deep roster players like an Isaiah Joe and Aaron Wiggins, somebody like that? Who would they protect? You never know. There's players all over the NBA in 9, 10 man roles that, maybe given an expanded opportunity, would be able to make a huge impact on this team, where they'd be given the reins or the keys to the kingdom pretty quickly. Now, this G League team, like I mentioned, would play the full NBA season, and that NBA team that was relegated would play in the G League the next season with all of their players attached to that roster. They would have to win the G League championship that next year to make it back into the NBA. And people might say that's a little harsh, but let me ask you, how much Wizards basketball have you watched recently? How much Memphis Grizzlies, how much Utah Jazz, how much Portland Trailblazers basketball are you missing out on? Their fan bases are going to be upset, right? You're in the G League, you're playing for a G League championship. However, I'm not watching Wizards games. Are you? Unless you're a Wizards fan, I don't think that it hurts the economy of the league too bad to relegate a team to disincentivize this tanking problem the NBA is facing. You want to play in the NBA? Win games. Be good. Try. Do something rather than intentionally sit players and lose. Now, I mentioned earlier, there's teams that actually just suck. This is a way to try to filter those teams and give other people an opportunity to not suck. Maybe I don't even know, a G League team, the Idaho Jackrabbits, the LA Mini Lakers, whatever teams we've got, Oklahoma City Blue, I actually believe is one. So the Oklahoma City Blue, they win the championship. They win. they're in the league now. They do their expansion. They've got a chance to go through and just be okay. That's all you have to do, and then you can continue to build on what you've done as long as you don't finish last. That's your only requirement. I think coaches would love this opportunity to try to build from the ground up a team that hasn't been in the NBA before. I think players would love to go to a team with a huge budget and be able to get a supermax contract or a max contract and take the reins. You're a Brandon Ingram. You're a Zion Williamson. You're somebody who wants your own team. You want to make an impact. You want to be the superstar, the marketing darling of a franchise. Let's give them a chance with this elevated G League team. And that way you have the opportunity to see more. The G League is elevated. The end of this season is electric. You would have teams in the bottom 3 of the draft trying everything they possibly can not to lose. The Thunder would be on the brink against the Wizards because they're fouling intentionally. They're zoning. They're trying everything they possibly can because they want to win so badly to stay in the NBA. The drama, the cinema of the end of the season, these teams that usually you wouldn't even care to turn on League Pass, those games are more important than ever. And it would make the end of the season all about winning and not falling too far to the bottom of the NBA record. That's my first idea. I would keep the lottery system the same otherwise, other than that G League team has or whoever wins that G League championship, maybe it's an NBA team the following season, gets the highest odds at the number 1 overall pick, tied with those bottom 3 teams, the same system we already have, and give everyone an opportunity to. Additionally, with that, the lottery selection needs to be a live event or a vetted event. I think most of us agree the Mavs getting that number 1 overall pick after trading Luka Doncic was a little fishy. Nobody wants to see that. I think if you were going to suggest the NBA draft is rigged, Utah would have gotten the number 1 pick this year and been gifted A.J. Debonsa, someone who's played his highest level basketball career in Utah the entire time. Now, maybe Utah makes a trade to get with the Wizards to get the number 1 pick so that they can get their Utah kid. However, it seems to me like everyone believes that NBA draft with the Mavericks was rigged. And I kind of lean that way as well. They didn't deserve it. They had such low odds. Now, everyone can say math is math, and there was always a chance they could do it. Make it live so that people believe you. Make it something that you can't cheat on to give these teams a fair and honest opportunity with the odds they're given to get the selections they deserve. Second idea. I think with 20 games remaining in the NBA season, they should lock the playoffs. Now, that might be pretty harsh. However, the NBA season is super long, 82 games. After 62 games, we should know pretty well who are the best teams in the NBA. Now, you might make an argument for the Celtics that one year that after the All-Star break, they became the hottest team in the NBA. Get there sooner. Get into it. Make the season matter more. So these first 62 games mean everything. We're trying to disincentivize tanking. And that at the highest end, your playoff odds are locked. You go 40-22, you might miss the playoffs that year because you were below these other teams that were trying more than you. However, that's a pretty solid record. But that's what I would do. If 20 games left, the odds are locked. The playoffs are set at that point. All the other teams, your record is still going to be what it is at the end of the season. We're going to do an overall count, but we're going to reset you to 0. I would keep the playoffs and the play-in the same. So the top 10 teams from each conference will be making the playoffs in that way. If you want to do away with conferences and just do the top 20 teams, doesn't bother me either. But the top 10 teams in this current setup that we'll do from each conference are going to be the playoff teams. Keep the play-in tournament. I think the play-in's electric. I like the single game elimination. I think it adds quite a bit of drama. The remaining teams, your record is set to 0-0. Your odds of getting the number 1 overall pick rely on how many games you win from that point forward. If you go 1-19 and nobody else finishes worse than that, you will receive now the lowest odds of getting the number 1 overall pick. Now, you'll say to yourself, well, that only leaves us with a 10-team lottery. There's 30 NBA teams. you're telling me that 20 of them are making the playoffs, including the play-in teams. We have a 10-team lottery. Correct. I would then include on each side the 2 losers of those single elimination tournament games based on seeding. We'll get, so whoever loses the 7th-8th game will be the 11th and 11th, and then 11th and 12th, excuse me, and then whoever loses the 10-9 games will be the 13th and 14th picks to finish out the lottery there. We'll have the exact same lottery now and just do it by record. Whichever team had a better record going in, you all lost your games anyway, and just reward the work that they put in during this season. Now, if you finish, say, 18-2 afterwards, you have the best record following the playoffs being locked. You have the number 1 overall pick. We're just going to go by wins. We're not doing a lottery at this point. Can you win games? Now the end of the season matters. You can't tank. You're still going to play a lot of playoff teams. You're still going to play these teams in the lottery. Your positioning is going to matter more than ever because everything's based on winning. And this way, we're not incentivizing any kind of losing. All we're incentivizing is how many games can you win now in these last 20 games. Now, the end of the season matters more than ever. Now, the playoffs are locked. Those playoff teams are locked in. However, we can still move the order around based on their record. And that's how we're going to get the playoff seeding set in. So the top 10 teams in each conference, if you're the 10 seed and you end up going 20-0 to finish your season, you might move all the way to 5 and get a way higher seed, but we can only get shifting among those top 10 teams. This rewards hard work in the beginning of the season. We're telling you, your first 62 games mattered infinitely. You're locked in, you can make the playoffs, but now we can see a lot of movement in that area. Now, winning still matters. We haven't came into rest here. We haven't suggested load management now. We still need you to win to get your seeds locked in. And the bottom teams also have to win to get the pick that they desire. If I'm the Washington Wizards, I'm not sitting Trae Young. I'm not sitting Anthony Davis, unless obviously they couldn't play. No. We traded for you guys so that we can win everything in the end of the year and try to get the number 1 overall pick and add somebody like AJ DeBonsa or Darren Peterson to be the best possible team we can next year and make a huge splash. Maybe you just missed the playoffs. Game 62 comes, you were 11th in the West. But you're a good team. Guess what? You can go and win all those games and be even more loaded coming into the next year. It's like the Warriors, for example, would have been one of these teams that would have lost in that play-in game or wouldn't have even made the playoffs in some years. What if Steph Curry suddenly has AJ DeBonsa next year because the Warriors locked in and they decided to win all their games and went 18-2, 19-1, and now have the number 1 overall pick because of the work they put in, and their next season is much more fruitful because they were able to try to win. Now, I hear you. What about teams that just suck? Well, they sucked before, they sucked in the last 20 games. I understand. I get it. But at least they have to try. And at least it encourages you, even if you're terrible, to try to implement new strategies, get the proper coach, get the proper personnel in there to win games and to not sit people and to push people and push these great playoff teams to the brink and try new things. I think you're going to see a lot more zone. I think you're going to see a lot of hard doubles, triangle and 2. You're going to see a lot of interesting offenses. What are we able to run to get the best possible shot? What is our strategy going to be? Are we going to press because we need to force turnovers? What can we do to win games? That is going to be what you're going to see, is teams care no matter what game it is. And can you imagine for the end of the year, you have 2 or 3 teams with identical records from this new lottery system, which really we're just playing for record. And that last game of the season decides whether you get the 3rd pick or the 1st pick. And the player available was Victor Wembanyama. You would do everything. That would have the aura, the value of an NBA Finals game, because the prize is everything. And how did you get that prize? By winning a basketball game, not by sitting out 10 of your players like the Grizzlies did earlier this year and playing a G League roster in the end of the year. Now, some of their players, were they injured? Sure. A lot of those guys made the injury report that day before or that same week with phantom injuries. That's ridiculous. Why not just bring a real G League team in then if you guys are going to sit everybody? Right? Incentivize winning. Make the season matter all throughout the season and reward teams for working hard, playing hard, and actually trying. Just to finish out that idea, the rest of the draft for this winning after the 62 game mark would just be in reverse order of record of how you finished the year. So if you finished as the number 1 overall seed, you had the best record, you would pick last in the first round for that season, and that's how it would go for both rounds. To tell you, well, you were so good, we had to give you the worst of the first round picks if you even have your own. Those are my ideas for how I think we can fix the NBA draft coming up after the 2029 season, and why I think this new draft system is going to crush teams that just suck and reward teams that are pretty good and give them equivalent odds to try to get the best players when they don't deserve it. All they need is a 10th, 11th, 12th pick with a good scout on them that can contribute, a la Jaime Jaquez Jr. for the Heat. These are the smart draft decisions that make these big differences and lets teams use their scouting department and make players like, I think one of the best players in this year's draft is Yaxel Lendenberg. He's probably going to go somewhere between 6 to 12 in the draft. He's going to make the biggest difference for a team that's probably going to be able to contend next year because you're picking in that range, right? You've got a decent record, but you're not the worst teams of those bottom 6. How do you think we could fix the draft? What are some suggestions that you guys have? I'm a little nervous for these next 3 drafts to see how it affects the worst teams in the NBA. That is all for me today, y'all. Thanks so much for tuning in. Catch me in the next video. Don't forget to like and subscribe.